This sermon is entitled God Has a Word for You. And what I found interesting is that when Joe phoned me on, I think it was Thursday, Joe said, "What's the theme for Sunday's sermon?" And I said, "I need to have a word with you." And it was actually quite interesting that her reaction was the same as from anybody. "Why, what have I done?" I said, no, that's the title of the sermon. I want to have a word with you. But I will tell you now that even at my age of 70 plus, my heart still sinks when someone says to me, "I want to have a word with you," or even the simple words, "You and I need to have a chat." It doesn't matter how the words are spoken. I always wonder what I've done wrong. What have I got wrong this time? What have I forgotten to do? What have I said? Those few words are enough to strike fear into the bravest man. It doesn't really matter. Those 6 words are enough to make any of us think about what we might have done to cause the other person to say that. Now, when I was in the Air Force, I could tell by how I was addressed as to how the forthcoming conversation might go. Examples are, "Hi, Sarge, can you spare a few moments for me later?" Or even, "Hey, Terry, can you pop in and see me later?" Both meant nothing to worry about, really, is there? However, "Sergeant Moore, we need to have a chat," meant the depth had just varied a great deal. So how do we feel when someone says, "I'd like to have a word with you"? I suppose a lot depends on the tone of the voice that has been used. But it still makes us wonder why that person wants to talk to us. We make a time to meet for the following day, and so for 24 hours we sweat out the problem, wondering what on earth are they going to say? Will it be good news or bad news? Have they found fault with something I've done? Have they found fault with something I haven't done? Will they ask us for a favour that is going to cost me either A, money, B, time, or C, effort, or D, all 3? Maybe they want to give us something, a gift, an invitation to dinner. That's the bright side. If this is happening at work, perhaps there's a promotion in the offing, or are they telling us we need to find some more employment somewhere? We have to wait until the appointed time to find out. Today, God is saying to us, "I want to have a word with you," which is an invitation to a polite conversation. But what on earth does God mean when he says, "I want to have a word with you"? It means something very different from what the boss might mean. The word that God has for us is not the kind of word that we're going to find in a dictionary. Not the word that can be translated from one language to another. It's a very unique word, and God is offering it to us now. One of the things about the universe is how vast it is and how it came into being. Now, don't get me wrong here. I know that God created it all with a simple word, but I do like to hear the astrophysicists as they try to explain it to us without God. I have no doubt that they're quite right. It began with a blinding flash of light as God spoke his powerful word and caused all things to come into existence. In fact, the book of Genesis tells us that God first said, "Let there be light," and lo, there was light. Now then, the brilliant brains during the creation, or as they put it, the beginning of the universe, they mostly agree that there was a huge, big bang. Now, I've seen explosions, thank you, I've helped cause them, and that implies some sort of event which must surely have been accomplished by an extremely bright light. Professor Brian Cox once said about this, "Imagine that there was a nothing, not even a vacuum, a nothing. And suddenly, into this nothing, something was forced." Great, so far so good. He went on, but he then said he has no idea how to put something into nothing and couldn't explain where the something had come from in the first place. I find it so sad that these brilliant men either cannot or will not take that final tiny step and accept that there is a way of forcing something into nothing. If you are God, you can do it with a word. The word I refer to this morning, of course, is Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son of God from eternity. The gospel writer calls Jesus the Word. Listen to John's gospel again just for a moment. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We saw his glory, such glory as the one and only Son of the Father, full of grace and truth. It tells us that the Word, Jesus, has chosen to become human. But let us not forget that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Through him all things were made. Just for a moment, let's try and grasp the immensity of this. In a very radical way, the all-powerful and eternal God chose to plunge himself into the arena and chaos of human life as you and I live it, and to take on the flesh and bones of our humanity. To put it another way, the creator of the universe, who flung stars into space and named them all, take note that God named all the stars. We've had to resort to using catalogue numbers. He who made the vast cosmos and the planets, moons, comets and asteroids, he who created life and then us in his image, he was born in a stable in Bethlehem. And as John said, from the very beginning, the Word, that is the Son of God, was with God. Through him, God made all things. The Word, Son of God, became a human being and lived among us. We miss out on the real significance of these events if we're not careful. We fail to realize exactly how much Jesus gave up to come and live as one of us. The fact we can never fully grasp is that he lived on this earth with all the pain, the suffering, the human tragedies, the sin, and the dying. He came into the thick of everything. He became to be one of us, live as one of us, work as one of us, and die as one of us, for us. The point of the verse, the Word became a human being, is that in the midst of our joys and agonies in this life, we are not alone. In Jesus, God is with us when we are happy and feeling content. In Jesus, God is with us when we are depressed, hurting, and sick. In Jesus, God is with us when we get good news. The other side of that coin is he is still with us when we hit with bad news. In Jesus, God is with us when we feel guilty and ashamed. In Jesus, God is with us when we are worried about someone we love. In Jesus, God is with us when we are caught up in a chain of events that we are powerless to prevent. In Jesus, God is with us when we are frightened or alone. Oddly, I just remind you once again that on the battlefield, there are no atheists. We all call out to God. The good news is that Jesus hasn't come to keep himself and separate from all of our troubles and pain, but he has come right here in the middle of it all. He truly is Emmanuel. God is with us. John Rosen is a good example of what it means for God to live among us. John Rosen was a doctor in a psychiatric hospital. Unlike all the other doctors there who were aloof and separate from their patients, he chose to move into the ward with them. He placed his bed among their beds. He lived the life they had to live. Day to day, he shared it. He loved them. If his patients didn't talk, he didn't talk. It's as if he understood what was happening. He was just there, And that communicated something to the patients that they hadn't heard in years. Somebody understood them. But then he did something else. He put his arms around them and hugged them. This doctor, with a string of letters after his name, his highly skilled and highly paid physician, who was almost like God to his patients because he had the control over their lives. This doctor held these unattractive, unlovable, and sometimes incontinent persons and loved them back into life. Often, when patients who had been able to speak uttered their first words, after a long period of silence, they first said, "Thank you." In simple terms, that's what God has done through Jesus. Jesus came and lived in our world. He became part of our life. And with our confused priorities, aching bodies, torn and bleeding spirits, and with our heartbreak and loneliness, he saw us in our worst sinful state, but still loved us and wanted to save us and hug us. God is not aloof and separate from our world. He is in the world with us. He has come to hug us and to hold us tight, even though sin makes us unattractive and unlovable. Jesus was born to show us the heart of God. It is a heart that throbs with love for every one of us. Jesus doesn't come with vague, abstract descriptions of love. He is love. Some years ago, I was told about a young man who had been to Thailand and had been ordained as a Buddhist monk. Day after day, he meditated in order to discover inner peace. In his search for inner peace, he had missed something very important. Jesus is love and peace. Jesus truly is God. Jesus truly gives himself to us and for us freely, full of grace and truth. Jesus is the only way to God the Father and eternal life. Jesus is the only source of inner peace. And in Jesus, we see as much of God as we shall ever hope to see in our early life. God does have a special word for us. The word is Jesus, who came to give his life for us in the shame of the cross, in his suffering and dying for the sins of all people. The angel made it quite clear to Joseph, "You shall call his name Jesus, for it is he who shall save his people from their sins." The angel invites us to trust Jesus. He challenges us to take Jesus seriously, not just today, but every day. He reminds that we have a Heavenly Father who loves us so much that he will become a child, become one of us, so that he can help us in whatever way we need all the time. He reminds us that just as the baby Jesus was given life in that grubby stable, Jesus wants to make our lives new and refresh our daily existence in the dirtiness of life in this world. God indeed has a word for us today. God created the universe and then became human because of and in spite of us, and just for every one of us.